Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Leading Change, the Wednesday episode this week with Lucia Alarcon. Hi, Lucia. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Lucia, we've already talked about change. I mean, it was just yesterday when we were talking about change, but today we dive deep into it and talk about how we Scrum Masters deal with change and how we can help it progress. Specifically, we want you to tell us a story of a change process you were involved with and walk us through the steps, like what were the things that you and others did during that change process, and highlight for us the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you learned back then that you still bring today to other change processes.
So for me, one change management experience or change process that I went through that I remember and enjoy to think about, it's once I started in a company, I was also fairly new to the company, and I observed that this company was working with several third parties and vendors. So there was a lot of stakeholders and parties involved. They had a very big, very large project of work, program of work, and they were using Trello for absolutely everything. And they have been using it over time. So when I came in, I noticed that they had like a amount of boards that was completely under, out of control. And they were using Trello without actually knowing much or even using Kanban or having the concept of workflows. So it was really, really messy to find information, really difficult to understand status. There was no visibility of work in progress and where things were at. So what I thought it was going to be a good approach to look into how we back then used that tool was to understand what people thought about the way we were using the tool. So I partnered up with a colleague, and I suggested that we started reaching out to people to ask about how they feel about the tool and what were their pain points using it, what would they like to change or see happening, what was working well, what wasn't, because I felt that a very important part of change is to understand where people are at and introduce change by also understanding their needs and giving them space to co-create that change instead of being disruptive and entering in and just changing from one day to the other without walking them through what a new way of working could look like. So we did a series of kind of like interviews with different team members, gather a bit of their pain points and how they felt about everything, and then progressively started introducing notions of workflows, Kanban, managing flow.
How did you do that? How did you do that progressive introduction of workflows, the Kanban method, and so on?
So I had meetings with different teams within the stakeholders and vendors network almost, and having short meetings to talk about how Kanban works and how workflows works and visualizing work, and started getting the information out there basically and asking them what of these could potentially be beneficial or useful or things that you could try out or have a little experiment with a particular subset of the work that you do, and asking what could be the benefit of introducing this, and open the discussion for people to, within what they know and their expertise and their knowledge of the area they were involved with, they could actually use the information and apply it in a way that makes sense for them. So that's how it started.
So you were kind of helping them by introducing the concepts and then working through the concepts with them on how it applies to their context.
Yeah, so I didn't tell them how to implement it. I gave them the information about the benefits of Kanban, how Kanban works, and then I made very clear that then the adoption of this was up to them in the sense of what it makes sense for them to do in their own stream of work and their own day to day. It was for them to decide what was the way to implement this and if this was applicable for their work. And to this point specifically, for example, in one of the meetings that I had when I was talking about Kanban and workflows, one of my team members, an absolutely lovely person, as I was explaining Kanban, I could see the expression on this person's face of, that feeling of this being disheartening situation of, oh my God. And this person said after the meeting, said to me, I've been using the tool wrong all this time. And I could see the panic, and I was like, and you've been using your tool in your very unique own way. And that's completely fine because a tool is not meant to be used in one unique single way. I'm opening options for you. If the way you're using the tool at the moment works for you and is efficient for you and you're able to do your work, then there's no need to reinvent the wheel and change absolutely everything and, redo what you've done. This is just opening possibilities to see if any of this could potentially be good for your work. And I thought I personally like to approach situations like this, giving people tools and not mandates,
Yeah, I love how you put it, because that's exactly why we started the podcast, right? It's give people tools, not mandates, and fill up their toolbox so that, whenever they are in a context you cannot even predict, they know that they have that toolbox. They can reach in and find something that is useful for them.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at this adoption process and you go through this different steps that you went through, like, collecting the pains, having the meetings with people, showing them how Kanban works and how the tool could be used in that context, and all other things that you might have done in that particular change process. What do you think triggered the change? What was the thing that, in your opinion, looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, kind of helped the organization move forward?
That's a really good question. I think it was very evident that people were overwhelmed with the amount of information, finding information, understanding where things were at, having, knowledge built up over time was very hard in the way they were using the tool. Everything was scattered. People were putting relevant information across multiple boards. So then there was a lot of disconnection and overwhelmed. So when I observed that and started kind of like opening the discussion, it became apparent that everyone needed to switch and change some of their practices. So that discussion facilitated change. And that's pretty much almost what I believe it's the job to be done when you're talking about change, is to open the space for people to actually have discussions on this. In many cases, companies don't really invest the time to open forums to discuss, taking the time to bring people on the journey, let them have the space to first receive the information, then process it, then understand what this means to me and how can I use it and how can I apply it, and communicate it at different levels as well, having the option to discuss it at a group level, to discuss it at a one-on-one, to discuss it in pairs, and to bring up the conversation often. So I think that is quite important. There's different ways of learning. There's different times for learning. There's different needs. So you've got to give people the flexibility and you've got to accommodate for all of these situations, right?
Absolutely. It's a great way to put it, and a great story as well. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role, we'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.